So I prepared a few comments here. There's going to be quite a few numbers, but the purpose is to get some information out there so that we can get a conversation started. I'm not going to talk for more than about 10 or 12 minutes. So the numbers. So in 2010, Canada's active workforce was about 17 million people. Of these, 6 million participated in pension plans, 4.5 million in defined benefit pension plans, and 1.5 million in other types of plans, such as defined contribution or hybrid plans. So what I mean by defined benefit plan is one that promises a benefit at retirement. So you work for a number of years, you have a salary at the end, your pension is determined by reference to your salary and your years of work, and it's a percentage of that. Those are the plans that provide the best benefit security in both the public and private sectors. So what matters most in terms of pension benefit security and sufficiency is membership in a defined benefit plan under the current system. In 2010, about 26% of the workforce participated in that kind of plan, 11% of private sector workers, and about 82% of public sector workers. Total retirement savings in 2010, excluding savings in the Canada and Quebec pension plans, was about $2.1 trillion. So it's a big file. The question is, how is this $2.1 trillion shared among the Canadian population? Well, about $1.17 trillion was held in defined benefit pension plans. The remaining $930 billion was held in individual RRSPs and other personal accounts. What all of this means is that about 25% of Canada's active and retired workforce holds more than half of all of Canada's retirement wealth. So applying some simple math, we can conclude that members of defined benefit plans, the best plans, have about 4 times more retirement wealth than everyone else. But it's even worse than that, because in the public sector, defined benefit pension plans allow savings at rates 4 to 5 times higher than is possible within an RRSP, with the result that career public sector workers have pensions worth anywhere from 4 to 7 times more than the private retirement savings that workers accumulate in the RSPs with similar salaries. So that's the top-down macro analysis. The bottom-up micro-analysis supports that. A study published last October by the C.D. Howe Institute, which I co-authored, showed that federal income tax rules routinely allow career members of defined benefit pension plans to save 3 to 4 times as much retirement wealth, or contribute 3 to 4 times more to their pension plans than people who save in RSPs. And it is the case that in the private sector, 75% of all workers are limited to participating in RSPs. Much of the savings gap between career members of defined benefit plans and everyone else can and should be blamed on Canada's outdated and dysfunctional rules for retirement saving, which provide much greater saving room to a minority than to the majority. Tax rules also prevent most of Canada's workers from participating in a real pension plan, which one might say is a pension plan that actually pays a pension. Without major reform to tax rules, any attempt to improve retirement savings for the majority of Canadian workers will be futile. In my view, there are 2 legitimate policy goals for tax rules for retirement saving. The first is to allow individuals of middle-class income to accumulate sufficient retirement wealth to maintain a level standard of living after they retire. Broadly, I would define the middle class as anyone earning between $50,000 and $150,000 a year when they retire. To have a level standard of living, they're going to need a pension that replaces somewhere between 50 and 70% of that income. So that means a pension of $25,000 to $35,000 for a worker earning $50,000, or $75,000 to $100,000 pension for a worker earning $150,000. The cost of these pensions today, in the environment of low investment returns that we have, is between 575 million and 2.4 million, 575,000 and 2.4 million. In other words, pensions are expensive. In theory, tax rules have been designed to allow these amounts to be saved, but in reality they allow it only for career members of good defined benefit plans who today are routinely accumulating pensions worth $1 to $2 million. The second legitimate policy goal for for pension tax rules is to prevent excessive tax sheltering. Our current tax system does this by placing annual and income-based limits on contributions and benefits. Albeit inequitably, tax rules currently achieve the second policy goal of limiting tax deferral, but obviously not the first, which is to allow all workers to accumulate adequate pensions. Low rates of pension plan membership, frequent job changes, fluctuating earnings due to unemployment and self-employment, and partial careers in Canada due to mid-career immigration all mean that much of Canada's workforce does not have the retirement saving room it needs. Retirement saving limits, as they are today, based on annual income and or limits that are based on annual income or service with an employer, and restrictions on pension plan membership determined by reference to employment simply do not make sense for Canada's workers in the 21st century. And they add costly and unnecessary complexity to plan administration. In my view, the first step to developing a solution to the retirement saving problem in Canada and truing it up so that everyone has an opportunity to save enough is to first identify the features that a good retirement saving system should have. So I've made a partial list here. One of the features that we should have would be to allow workers to contribute more when they experience investment losses, to contribute when they have temporary workforce absences, such as for pregnancy, maternity leave, due to illness or disability, to allow workers with fluctuating income to have the same pension as workers with steady income, to promote new, innovative, and efficient retirement plan designs, to allow flexibility in terms of the timing of contributions, to provide enough saving room for all workers except those who are above the middle class who can take care of themselves in other ways, to provide equal access to Canadian-born and immigrant workers, to prevent excessive tax deferral, and to have a simple, comprehensible regulatory structure. The solution proposed in the paper mentioned earlier is to repeal current tax rules and to replace them with a single lifetime accumulation limit of $2 million indexed to inflation. So why $2 million? It's obvious that not everyone needs to save $2 million, and most will not need to save $2 million to retire. But having more room than you need does no harm, just as having the $700 billion of unused RSP room today does no harm to the low-income workers who hold it now. The $2 million limit will help middle-class workers without pensions, but unfortunately it will do nothing useful for those making less than $50,000 to $60,000 a year, because this is a group of workers who should not be saving for retirement in traditional pension plans and RSPs, as shown in another C.D. Howe report published in August that focuses on the saving needs of lower and lower middle income workers. Among other things, this paper shows that low-income workers who save for retirement in tax-deferred pension plans, such as the new pooled registered pension plan that the government introduced this year, will actually be worse off. That's because withdrawals from these plans will reduce income-tested benefits, such as the Guaranteed Income Supplement and the Alberta Seniors Benefit, with the result that low-income retirees who save in these plans will pay taxes of as much as 50% to 80% of the withdrawals when they withdraw their savings. To the extent that low-income retirees save for retirement, they should do it in a tax-paid structure, because withdrawals from this kind of plan, such as tax-free savings accounts, do not reduce income-tested benefits such as the Guaranteed Income Supplement. To make it easier for low-income workers to save, the August paper proposes that tax rules be modified to allow both tax-deferred and tax-free pension saving, to replace annual limits on tax-free saving with a lifetime accumulation limit of $250,000, which is arguably the upper bound of the amount that any low and middle income worker could reasonably expect to accumulate over a lifetime. This would eliminate the age discrimination of current TFSA limits of $5,000 annually, which provide much greater saving room to younger, wealthier Canadians of greater than to everyone else, especially those who are older who have not been able to accumulate contribution room. Most pension commentators do not pay a lot of attention to tax rules, but they should, because tax rules are the foundation on which retirement savings plans are built. If the foundation isn't right, nothing can be. This is an area squarely within the jurisdiction of the federal government, and in 2011, the federal government had an opportunity to make the rules fair by supporting Bill C-574, the Retirement Income Bill of Rights. This bill would have effectively forced equality of access to retirement saving room for all workers by effectively changing discriminatory tax rules. But after passing second reading, supported by all parties except the government, it died on the order paper when the last federal election was called. That concludes my remarks. I'll pass it to Mr. Crew and we can have questions.
Well, I do hope that no one is expecting such a learned treatise from me, because you're not going to get it. You have the economist and then you have the politician. You know, I'm a great fan of the comics. And a couple of days ago I opened up the Toronto Star and I started reading down the comics, and I came down to Adam. I don't know how many of you know Adam. It's a great little comic about a stay-at-home dad and his son Clayton, who asks him most embarrassing questions. And Clayton asked the question, is it true, Dad, we all are going to get old and die? And the next 3 or 4 little cuts were Adam fumbling all over the place, trying not to answer the question. And the final one was Clayton thinking, you know, he didn't even answer my question. And the final one was Adam saying, I got out of that really well. And that reminds me, I guess, a bit about tonight and about pension talk. I mean, it's something that people don't want to talk a whole lot about. It's something that affects us all, but we don't want to think about getting old, and we don't want to think about getting old in poverty. When pensions were first discussed and brought into light by all people, Otto von Bismarck in Germany, I'm led to understand, was the first person to actually come up with a pension scheme. It was quite a genius scheme. He set the age at 65 because the average age of a person living in that time was 66. And so, you know, a person would gain about 8 or 10 months on average from a pension scheme. So they had to look forward to 8 or 10 months of actually getting some government money before they died, and the state could afford all of it. And, you know, fast forward to today, we still have a retirement age at 65, and we have a life expectancy for males in the 85 and for females of 88 in the province of Ontario if you're born today. And so you have that period where we've gone from 8 or 10 months to where we've gone to 20 plus years. And have we kept up with all of this? I'm not sure. Just 3 points I want to make. First of all, there was a very good report written a couple of years ago by Harry Arthurs. Harry Arthurs was tasked by the Ontario government to look at pension plans and to see what could be done to make them stronger. And in those days, when he was doing his report, there was a couple of pension plans that were in real problem with solvency. They didn't have enough money, and Harry Arthurs made some recommendations to make sure that they would remain solvent. And one of the recommendations he made was that we had to up the amount that people had to pay, individuals had to pay, in order to assure the solvency of all plans in the province of Ontario. Well, of course, you know, the politicians got hold of this. Harry Arthurs said that it needed to be changed from $1 per person per year to $5 per person per year to make all of the plans solvent. Well, of course, when other political parties got hold of this, that was a 500% increase. And then one minister stood up and said, and it could even go to $10, and that was a 1,000% increase. But the reality is that workers would be asked to put in a little tiny bit of money, or pensioners, into their pension plans of a few dollars a year to make sure that we didn't have any problems. We didn't have the Nortels and everything else that happened to us. So we have people out there looking at these things, but we also have those who are reluctant to part with $4 a year and those who are reluctant to part with $9 a year. They're very happy to spend $1 a year for a system that doesn't work, but they're not so happy with any of the other solutions. The second thing I want to talk about is those who advocate for plans that primarily will benefit rich people. I mean, I heard my friend here tonight talking about putting aside $2 million at the time you retire. I certainly don't consider myself to be poor. I consider myself to be middle class, even though I was born in Regent Park and had a little bit of a rough time at first. You know, as an MPP, I make $120,000 a year. We don't have a pension, but we put money aside. My wife and I put money aside in RRSPs and in the provincial government plan, which they match 50-50. And, we have that. But I don't expect that too many people would be able to put aside $2 million a year. Just to tell you my own private business, I have been putting in money every single year, save and except the first one, that people were allowed to put RRSPs. I looked at it, but I was too young and just married, and I didn't have enough money to actually think about that year. But every other year I put the maximum amount that is allowed by law to me. I have never once failed since the second year of putting that in. You know, and today I have the magnificent sum when that paper comes in to tell me I have $120,000. Now that's a far cry from 2 million. That's a far, far cry from 2 million. And I think that if I have that problem, then so do other people. I have other investments. I know I own a house, which probably when I retire I'll have to sell. But I don't think that's a bad thing. Because it's a house here in Toronto, and I can buy a house somewhere else for about a quarter of the price. And I know that, and so does everybody in this room. So don't cry for me. But people who don't have that luxury, who don't live in Toronto and outright own their home, don't have that luxury. And when they retire, they will not have the kinds of money. I heard one of my colleagues in the legislature today had a press conference. I'm not supposed to be political, so I won't even name the party, but it's the Conservatives. And, I heard Tim Hudak today, and he stood up and he came out with the white paper on the Conservative plan. And you know, it's I guess it's reasonable to people who think it's reasonable. He wants to do a couple of three things. Actually, it's a 5-point plan, but the three that grab me the most is the first one. He wants to limit people so that those who currently in the federal, provincial, or wherever you would have the jurisdiction, municipal government, who have a defined benefit plan would have to, any new hires would have to go to the defined contribution plan. And I don't know how that's going to work. I mean, in the short term, sure, the employer is going to save a lot of money, but the defined benefit plan is paid for by contributions of younger workers as they come in. When they're no longer paying, I don't know how fast the plan will run out of money, because it's not designed to simply have enough there now, and 35 years from now, when all of those people are gone and the new people have all taken their place, as happens in government and business everywhere, whether there will be enough money to sustain those who paid into it. And I do know myself, as a former federal government employee, I put aside 14.1% of my salary every year that I worked for the federal government for 20 years. I paid 14.1% for an indexed pension. And you know, anybody who pays that in the provincial government, the municipal government, or perhaps the federal, although the plan won't go that far, would be very, very angry to think that their pension plan is going to be put at risk. The second thing is he wanted to go to the PRPP model, which my friend here wrote a very good report on. And I would say that would be a fine thing, save and except nobody wants it. If you got today's National Post, and I am required to read that as the finance critic for the NDP, although it's not my favorite reading on most days, there was a very good article in there about PRPPs, that literally, although the federal government passed the legislation, not one province has bid on it. Not one of them. The only one that had that put forward some legislation to go down that road was in Quebec, and it died with the death of the Liberal Party in the last election. And nobody else has gone there, not Ontario, not any of the other 8 provinces, not in any of the territories. And the National Post lamented that that idea looks like it's not going to go anywhere. And last but not least, the old bugaboo was raised about raising the pension age from 65 to 67. That may be good economics. I'm not going to stand here and deny to you it's not good economics. It's very bad politics. And if we can see what happened when Stephen Harper raised that issue by going to Davos, Switzerland, and raising that same issue there that he was afraid to announce in Canada, he got pilloried. And everybody from CARP, the Canadian Association for Retired People, to pension groups across the country, and many, many of seniors withdrew their support from him. And the actual numbers, the Conservatives plummeted 4 or 5% in the polls in a single month after that announcement. So I'm not sure that, although it may be good economics, it's very good politics and is within the realm of the possible. To my mind, and I'm going to close with this, the best thing we can do is to look at the alternatives available to us. And although they may be expensive, as my friend earlier said, the best plans are the defined benefit plans. They're the best ones. Everybody remembers when you worked in a factory for 35 or 40 years and you retired at 65, you had a comfortable living, a comfortable amount of money coming in, and it was sustainable for as long as you lived. If you were lucky enough to live to 90, you didn't run out. If you have your own benefit plan and you plan on living till you're 80 and you live till you're 85, I will tell you, if you've spent the money in advance, there's nothing there in the end. And so people had better hope that they die young, or younger, than that they hold on to the end if you go with any other type of plan. We think it's the best plan. It has been a dream in Ontario for years. That grand old man of electoral politics in Ontario, Leslie Frost, and we were talking about this earlier tonight. Leslie Frost had a dream about setting up an Ontario-based plan back in the 50s. And of course, it's all stopped when we came up with the Canada Pension Plan and all the little iterations out from that. But he had a plan that people in Ontario would be protected and could pay into their own plan. We think that an idea like that should come to the fore. Is it going to be expensive? Yes. Is it going to be universal? Yes, it has to be universal. And we believe that people have to be able, they can say they don't want to be in it, but everybody is in it. It's like reverse billing. You have to say you don't want in it if you make too much money to actually pay. And we also think that the time has come where it is pooled so that people can go from one workplace to another workplace to another workplace, knowing full well when you hit that age of 65 or 67 or 69 or whatever some politician in the future determines that age to be, that you're going to have a pension plan, and that if you are lucky enough, or perhaps as some would think unlucky enough, to live till you're 95 years old, you'll still have that money coming in so that you don't have to worry about freezing in the dark in some attic. Those would be my political comments as opposed to economic ones. Okay.